I don't think it's easy to get student accommodation. Prices are too high for students because it seems like we're renting apartments and we're just renting rooms.
Some of us don't really afford the accommodations. That is when you find that most students actually move to the flats because it's much cheaper, and especially for children who are sharing one room and they pay more like for sharing, which is like too expensive for most of us to afford.
Well, I haven't actually looked for student accommodation because I travel most of the time. It is inconvenient because like I'm kind of distant from school.
Based on my experience around here, I think it's expensive. That's why there are a lot of accredited NSFAS students who live in here.
As lockdown restrictions ease up and students return back to their respective colleges and universities, the issue of access to affordable student accommodation is back on the table. But this time, it's the MMC for Development Planning, Lawrence Koza, who's driving home the issue in council.
When you look at student accommodation in the past and now, what you find is that in the past, student accommodation was mainly the domain of the university. So the universities would be able to make accommodation available and accessible to their students. But because of the numbers and the financial challenges that are faced by the universities and the TVET colleges and the state, because some, often they would get money from government, I think it has become important for other players to come to the party. And as the city of Johannesburg, there are two levels at which we are entering this space. One is to actually provide the student accommodation themselves via one of the companies that we own, Joburg. But secondly, through attracting private capital. That, some of the buildings that, the citizens of Johannesburg complain about, that we expropriate, that 10% of them should be made available to private developers working in partnership. So the 10% would go to Joburg to deal with the student accommodation problems. But then some of the buildings that have been expropriated through the Johannesburg Property Company would then be made available to private developers because we think that would not be able to deal with student accommodation problems without the private sector. According to a study by the interministerial committee that was set up by the Minister for Higher Education, Plains Demand in 2011, there are chronic shortages in this space. We need about 300,000 units for universities and about 200,000 student accommodation units for the TVET colleges. And people have said that you need about 10-20 years to address that problem at a cost of about 150 billion rands. Government simply does not have that money. So you need to attract private capital. You need to attract developers. And that's what we think we should be able to do as the city of Johannesburg. If we do it right in student accommodation, then it's something that can be replicated in other areas where you put proper, predictable policies that would attract investment. When you are a private developer, you can have all the credibility in the world, but for you to galvanize capital, there must be a sense that there are predictable processes that will go through. That if we give you money today, that the application via my department would have been completed in 3 months, for instance. The bulk infrastructure will be provided. So without that certainty, it's difficult to attract investment. And I think that what we're trying to do now, because the reason why we have this committee that I chair is so that you can have every player in this process participate, so that you don't have a situation where you've released land, but you can't develop it because there's no bulk infrastructure. So it's a consolidated effort in the city, and we are quite excited about it. But more importantly, our excitement is important, but what is more important is that the private sector is quite excited about this process.
Hi, I'm Danny Glover, and you're watching Joburg Today.